Now, part of the problem is, I know that the Red Cross received 3 Nobel Peace Prizes after the World War II or 1944. But part of the problem is that during the Holocaust, the Red Cross was also accused of not doing enough to save Jews, to help the Jews that were incarcerated. And in fact, the Red Cross had to apologize for their inaction in confronting the Holocaust. The bias that's shown against Israel makes that apology ring hollow, because many Israelis and Jews and decent people are saying this is a repetition of history once again.
That's a painful part of our history. We've acknowledged that. We've been on the record about it. We are working every day to rebuild trust.
But you feel you have rebuilt trust with the Jewish community and with Israel? Because if you ask the average Jew what they think about the Red Cross, they say they're biased against Jews in Israel.
Listen, I think we've made a lot of strides, and I think we've demonstrated our commitment to humanitarian aid in all shapes and forms. That's a universal requirement of ICRC, no matter where they operate. International humanitarian law. I'll just add that international humanitarian law has evolved a lot since World War II. That expands protections for civilians, and we're committed to fulfilling our duty, which is to protect civilians and get them the humanitarian aid that they need to lessen the devastating horrors of armed conflict.
Now, giving humanitarian aid where it's unchecked, where the majority goes to Hamas, is that something which the Red Cross agrees to? Because it's a known fact, as I said earlier, that when you bring humanitarian, they steal it, and it's not used to help the population. It's used to enrich Hamas. So doesn't the Red Cross have an obligation to make sure that if they're going to give money, they can tie it in and say, we've got to make sure it doesn't go to fund terrorism, because basically it's funding terrorism.
Absolutely. We have a responsibility to ensure that the aid we provide, not only in Israel, but in any part of the world, is effective and it's accountable. We've built in mechanisms in place to ensure that, and we've also worked with the party and the parties that have negotiated this Gaza ceasefire agreement to exert the influence they have to do their own measures as well, and we support that.
Can you give us an idea how much money has the Red Cross pumped into Gaza?
Certainly millions of dollars from the states that signed the Geneva Conventions, right? Which include the United States, which include our partners around the world. And those go to not just food and medicine, right? But to rebuilding infrastructure that has been destroyed in Gaza, power, water, secure and safe roads. These are all the types of humanitarian aid that we're focused on as well.
So I want to get back. I know you say you don't want to tie humanitarian aid to negotiations, but it would seem to me that if you're pumping millions upon millions of dollars into Gaza, that you can say, listen, we want to be able to have access to the hostages. We want to make sure that these terrorist shows don't go on. You have leverage, even though you may be a small group. I know you're unarmed, but you have leverage, and I'm just surprised that the leverage has not been used. You even negotiated with the Taliban, where you got to visit Taliban prisoners and other terrorist groups, even in Iran during the hostage negotiations when the hostages were taken in Iran in the 1970s. You have a tremendous amount of clout. You're telling me that it exists and you can get things done anywhere in the world but in Gaza?
Yeah, listen, I'm still new to ICRC, but I can't imagine that we would have threatened to withhold aid to Afghanistan.
You can slow it. Okay, but if you know that the majority is being stolen, you have leverage saying, listen, we have no guarantee that the money is going to the people. In the case of Gaza, billions of dollars are not going to help the Gazians. It's going to help Hamas. They're stealing it, not just from you, any humanitarian they're stealing. So you have leverage been saying, hey, I'm not giving money until we get this done because you're stealing the humanitarian aid. The millions upon millions of dollars are being stolen.
Yeah, listen, we're concerned about how our aid reaches people and where it reaches them. And we continue to work to strengthen those accountability measures, including with the partners in the Gaza ceasefire agreement. But unfortunately, for some folks involved in this, we can't condition aid. We can't determine who gets it and who doesn't get it. That's not what international humanitarian law.
You can say accountability. You can be strict and say we're going to give aid, but we have to be 100% certain the money is going to where it's going. Right now, it's not going to where it's supposed to be going. So you have leverage right there. You're not supposed to be giving humanitarian aid to criminals and to terrorists, and that's what's happening.
Listen, we provide humanitarian aid and protections for every human. We don't make
But
a
it's not going to the
determination.
humans. It's going to terrorists, not going to humans for majority.
We don't make a determination again of who is friend or foe. We
No, but
believe
they're
that all
stealing. They're
humans are endowed
stealing
with
it. They're
dignity.
stealing it. So
I
it's
mean,
not.
listen, we've worked with parties to the agreement to develop mechanisms in place to work with them and work with
But it's not
folks in
working. It's
Gaza.
not working because they're still stealing it.
Yeah,
That's a fact. You can have mechanisms in place. It
sure.
sounds nice, but they're still taking the aid and using it for their dastardly purposes. That's what's upsetting. Listen, Red Cross is a great organization, and they're volunteers and people going into dangerous zones. I just wish they'd be doing more to help Jews and Israelis, and I believe they're repeating the same mistakes of the Holocaust. That's what lots of Jews are going to tell you. You failed during the Holocaust. There's a lawsuit now, and Red Cross has failed Israel and the hostages now.
Listen, we're receptive to those concerns, and we continue to work to rebuild trust. And all we want to do is make sure that we're delivering humanitarian aid to the right places and it's effective.
So let me ask you this: there hopefully will be more hostages releases. What is being put in place to make sure that the Red Cross is not a glorified car service and not there for prop in the Hamas propaganda show?
I can tell you that we're having right now private discussions in our usual mode of working, which is what we call bilateral confidential discussions. We can't reveal those because it could jeopardize our neutrality. Neutrality is what gets us access to Gaza and gets us access to these hostages in the first place. But we continue, even publicly, to call for dignity and respect for these hostages and continue to work with the parties that influence them as well to try to do the same.
No, I hear what you're saying, but it doesn't always work out that way. And here you have a situation where you have governments involved in meetings, and you have, at the end of the day, the Red Cross is there on the ground, and just the way it looks with the Hamas terrorists and with military gears, and the way they're humiliating the hostages, and the Red Cross is sitting there, and part of it, it just seems there has to be a better way.
Absolutely, we totally agree. There must be a better way. But the choice comes down to: do we get these hostages home, do what we can to protest these distasteful conditions, or do we suspend the mission? And it's another day that families can't be reunited with their loved ones.
Around the world, the Red Cross, when it sees atrocity, does it say that they see atrocities taking place, whether it in Sudan or Afghanistan or other parts of the world? Is that official policy where they condemn what they see?
We don't see that as the usual most effective tool in getting humanitarian aid. That sort of condemnation could block us access from an area or from people who need our humanitarian aid the most. Then we're not effective at all. And again, our goal here is to get humanitarian aid to the people that need it the most.
It sounds like, you have your work cut out for you. What safeguards, and by the way, is this unusual in the case of the hostages from Israel that are being held by Hamas, that you have no access to them? Is there any other conflicts around the world where the Red Cross does not get access to them? I bet it happens very rarely.
Listen, we talk with armed groups to get access to hostages in Venezuela, in Colombia, to detainees and people in detention in Ukraine, in similar situations. And that's a fight that we continue to have not only around the world, but also in Gaza.
Now, when New York Times reporter David Rose was held by the Taliban in 2008, the Red Cross delivered him a letter from his wife. Were you at least able to get or try to get some communication between the hostages and their families?
With the hostages still in detention, still in captivity in Gaza right now?
Right. Has any time, because that should be easier to accomplish than even visiting them. Has any of that happened, or why was that refused?
Absolutely. I can't talk about the private discussions that we have to help us gain access to these hostages. But yeah, delivering messages between family, between hostages, between people in detention is a core part of what we do, and we continue to work on it.
Now, I mentioned that after the Holocaust, the Red Cross did apologize to the Jewish community for what it didn't do to save Jews during the war. Do you think an apology will be forthcoming after this war is over, again, to Israel and the Jewish people?
Listen, Zev, as I said from the beginning, we're a neutral humanitarian actor. Our job is to ensure we get humanitarian aid to the people that need it. No matter
But would you say
how
you failed the
impossible-
hostages? Because aside from the show when they were released, the Red Cross has not been seen with the hostages, whether getting letters to them, food, visiting them, medicine. So the only part where people see the Red Cross has been the pony show, which the terrorists put on, and being a glorified car service for them. So at the end of the day, would you say, and will there be apologies? Can you see that happening once again after the war is over?
Zev, as I said this earlier in our chat, it's a painful reality. We've been unable to access the hostages, but it's not because we haven't been trying. It's because we haven't been granted access.
Steve Dorsey, we appreciate you being here with us. I know it's not been easy to talk about it, and I know you're speaking in front of Jewish groups, and I guess some of them, have any of them been positive when you've been speaking to them?
Absolutely. We certainly get feedback, including from private conversations that we have around the world with parties that have a stake in this, but how difficult and how many hard choices we're presented with as the humanitarian aid group that is delivering aid, of course, on the ground, but also to help facilitate these hostage releases, return of remains, but also trying to get access to hostages, and that's a commitment that we won't abandon.
But is it a failure that in most cases around the world, you're able to get through to the worst terrorists and they're willing to comply on some level? Here with Hamas, the Red Cross couldn't get them to comply on any level, including not doing an embarrassing takeover of live hostages and bodies to Israel and doing that show. So it seems like the Red Cross now be able to have any impact at all on Hamas, despite giving them millions of dollars of aid.
Listen, these hostage negotiations that take place around the world, they're also frustrating. I think anyone you would talk to involved in those would reflect the same sentiment, and that's frustrating for us in Gaza as well.
Steve Dorsey, spokesman for the Red Cross. We appreciate you being here with us. I wish things would be different. I know that Red Cross does some great work around the world, but part of the problem is that the legacy of the Holocaust hangs over what's going on over here, and the fact for many years the Israeli Red Cross was not allowed to be part of the International Red Cross. That also is part of the legacy, and I just wonder what's going to happen after the war is over. I believe that the Red Cross will need to do some more polishing and soul searching as far as how the Jews and Israelis in captivity were not provided with Red Cross access.
Zeb, thanks for having me on your show. And like I said, from the top of our conversation, we're committed to doing everything we can to accessing these hostages and to influencing in the most way that we can that they have dignity and respect throughout this entire process.
Thank you for watching. If you like this content, you like our programs, please like and subscribe, as it helps the channel get these important conversations out there to a larger audience. So please become a supporter of Talkline with Brenner by liking us, by supporting us, and telling all your friends to watch. Thank you.